So yeah, thanks for joining us here today. I'm Sam Smith from the Greenhouse and Energy Minimum Standards Regulator within the Department of the Environment and Energy in Canberra. So welcome to the information session on the new Zoned Energy Rating label for air conditioners. And to start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we are meeting on and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So agenda of what we're talking about today. So I'll give the dry stuff first, so a bit of a brief overview of air conditioning regulation, talk about the new Zoned Energy Rating label or ZERL, talk about what's changed from the old label and why, talk specifically about the changes for portable air conditioners, look at registration and compliance, including responsibilities that retailers have when advertising units in store and online. Then I've got a section of answers to questions that you'll likely be asked or you might be asked by your customers. We'll have a Q&A session on the Zoned Energy Rating label section. We'll move to morning tea. After morning tea, we'll have the presentation by the Ozone Protection and Synthetic Greenhouse Gas Program. Now, a few things, as we go through this presentation, there'll likely be some areas where people in the room will absolutely know what I'm talking about, but there'll be people who won't. So installers may know everything that I'm talking about, but retailers may not. So we just need to make sure that everyone's on the same page. So I'm really not trying to teach you how to suck eggs or tell you how to do your job. Just trying to make sure that everyone in the audience is on the same page and knows what they're talking about. So we'll be handing out a feedback form at morning tea. This will have options on it for you to select if you'd like to receive any more of the training material that we provided, like the fact sheet that we have and the booklet and anything else that we develop. So if you put your details on there, we'll be able to send you out more copies of those, which you can use to train your staff or inform your customers. We'll also provide an electronic copy of this presentation, so you don't need to be madly trying to scramble down links or write them down as we go through. And we are presenting this roadshow through Australia. This session is being filmed, but only me. I'm the only one who's being filmed, so none of you are being filmed. And the video of this will be up on our website, the energyrating.gov.au website afterwards. So, introduction to energy efficiency regulation. So, air conditioners and other appliances are regulated in Australia under the GEMS Act, or the Greenhouse and Energy Minimum Standards Act. This used to be a bunch of state-based legislation. Has now been pulled together into the national framework, which is the GEMS Act. So there are 22 different products that have to be that are covered under the GEMS Act, but only 7 products require energy rating labels. So the 7 that are labelled are air conditioners, fridges and freezers, washing machines, dryers, dishwashers, TVs and computer monitors. So the way it works in terms of regulation is each GEMS product has a separate legislative instrument called a determination, which sets out all of the things that need to be covered for a product to be registered in Australia. I'm not going to go into the technical detail of determinations. That's an entirely different session. But 3 main things that need to be covered are the energy efficiency requirements. So often in this we talk about MEPS, or minimum energy performance standards. And so MEPS are the minimum limit or the minimum performance that a unit has to meet to be able to be sold in Australia. There are also labelling requirements which cover what has a label, what doesn't have a label, where labels have to be affixed and things like that. And there are occasionally other requirements which I'm not going to get into today. So air conditioners have been regulated for energy efficiency since 2004, but have been required to show an energy label since 1987. So the determination says what types of air conditioners must display an energy label, what must not, and a couple of other things. So it's the air conditioner determination that was signed off by the Energy Minister in March this year that set out the new rules for air conditioners and has set out the new Zoned Energy Rating label, the ZERL. So what's happening when? So right now, manufacturers or importers can either register their product to the old determination, which is the 2013 determination, or they can register their product to the new 2019 determination. If they go to the 2013 determination, they can only use the old energy rating label. If they move to the 2019 determination, they can use the ZERL. So what this is going to result in is that there's going to be 2 different labels in store for up to 5 years. Now, from the 1st of April 2020, all new models that are registered and any models that have their registration renewed, they must use the new label. So what the result of this will be is we'll see portable air conditioners registered and labelled for the first time, and you'll start seeing more models with the new label in store. But we will still see, like in the image here, units with the old label next to units with the new label for potentially up to 5 years. And I'll talk a bit more in detail about that in future slides. So what's the point of regulation? So regulation improves energy efficiency, but more importantly, customers are aware of energy efficiency and customers choose to buy more efficient products. So I'll explain that through this graph, which is a bit complex, but every blue dot on this graph represents the energy efficiency of a less than 4 kilowatt unit that was registered in a certain year. Years progress along the x-axis. The red line shows the average of energy efficiency of all units registered that year. The green line shows the weighted sales average of units that customers are choosing to buy. So what this shows, because the green line's above the red line, customers on average are choosing to buy air conditioners that are more efficient than the average unit on the market. So customers are interested in energy efficiency. They want energy efficient products. They want lower energy bills. So we have a video.
The energy rating label on air conditioners just got a whole lot cooler. Where you live changes the performance of your air conditioner, so what works well in a hot climate may not work as well in the cold. For 3 different climate zones, there are different star ratings. Choose what's best for where you live to keep your running costs down and make your space more comfortable. Work out the correct sized unit for the space that needs heating or cooling. Then use the capacity on the label to compare similar sized models. And remember, more stars is more energy efficient. Use the energy consumption to calculate an annual running cost. Lower energy consumption means lower running costs. In cold climates, use the 2-degree heating capacity for models that can cope better with frosty conditions. The label also shows how loud the air conditioner is at full power. Good to know if you want to limit noise for yourself and your neighbours. The new rating label will start appearing in stores from late 2019. For more information, go to energyrating.gov.au.
So that's a bit of an introduction to what we'll be talking about today and sort of why we have the zoned energy rating label, but I'll go into more detail than what you see in that 1.5-minute video. So this is a picture of the new zoned energy rating label. I'll spend a bit of time going through the different sections in this. There's a lot more information on this label than there was on the previous energy rating label. So same as on the old label, there's a section which tells you what the brand and the model number of the unit you are, so customers can be sure that they're looking at the same unit as the one that they're thinking they're looking at. There's still the cooling capacity number in kilowatts, which is the cooling capacity if the outside temperature is 35 degrees. This number is directly comparable to the cooling capacity on the old energy rating label. The top 7-degree heating capacity number is again in kilowatts and is directly comparable to the heating capacity on the old energy rating label. But now we also have the 2-degree capacity. So on the old label, manufacturers and installers and importers could choose to disclose this information, but most of them didn't. But now, under the new determination and with the new label, testing at 2 degrees is mandatory. So you will see this number on the label. I've got some slides in a few that will go into more detail about the 2-degree number, why it matters and when you use it. So one of the main things that's different is we've gone to a zoned system. So there are 3 climate zones that have been determined for Australia, which is the hot zone, which covers Brisbane, Darwin, so the Pacific Island areas. The average zone, which covers most of the middle of Australia, but you'll notice that a lot of the major population centres look like they're on the border of a zone. So both Perth, Adelaide and Sydney are all in the average zone, even though they look like they could be in the cold zone. And then you've got the cold zone, which covers Canberra, Melbourne, and all of New Zealand. So what we now have is we have a star rating for both heating and cooling, and crucially, an electricity use for heating and cooling shown in each zones. So what this highlights is how the unit will perform in different climatic conditions. And unlike the old label where you just have a capacity and no indication of how much energy the unit would use, this label gives an indication of how much energy it's likely the unit will use. And noise ratings are now shown for the first time. So you'll see an indoor and an outdoor noise rating. So this is rated at full capacity. So predominantly the most units that are sold in Australia are inverter units, and inverter units are almost never running at full capacity. So while it does say that, for example, this unit will be running at 59 decibels outside, it's rare that it's going to be that for long. But it is the maximum capacity, the maximum noise that it will show at full capacity. Okay, so how does climate affect air conditioner performance and efficiency? So the message on the map is really the core of why the new label was introduced, because air conditioner units perform differently in different conditions. And while like the installers in here might know, customers probably don't. So looking at the zone, some of the first things your customers might ask is like, well, what does average mean? And it gets hotter in like we had a customer or call us up and say, I live in southwest Queensland, and where I live in Charleville, it gets ridiculously hot. It's so much hotter than Brisbane. Why are we in an average zone and Brisbane's a hot zone? That doesn't make sense. And the thing is that for air conditioners, it's not just about how hot it is, because it gets bloody hot in southwest Queensland, but it's also about how cold it gets. And the key thing is that when it gets below 5.5 degrees outside, your air conditioner, the refrigeration coils will start to ice up. And when that happens, the unit needs to run a defrost cycle. And if your unit has not been optimized to run a decent defrost cycle, the unit can ice up completely and stop working. So when you have icing and frosting conditions, you need to have a unit that can deal with it. So it's not just about how hot it is, it's also about how cold. So in cold climates, customers should focus on the heating stars, because heating is the function they're going to use more. And in hot and humid climates, customers should focus more on the cooling stars. So the old label versus the new label, what's changed and why? I've touched on a couple of these things already. On the left, you've got the old label. The capacity and the power are both in kilowatts, but it's got no clear indication of annual power use. And one of the important things is it implies exactly the same performance across the entirety of Australia and New Zealand. So it doesn't take into account any of the climatic differences. The new label, capacity is still in kilowatts. So the cooling capacity and the heating capacity are still comparable between the old label and the new label. It shows the capacity at 2 degrees. It shows the zoned rating showing different performance in different conditions. Includes a noise rating for the first time. A couple of things to note. You can't have both labels on a unit at the same time. They're either registered to the 2013 determination and they have the old label, or they're under the 2019 determination and they can have the new label. And you can't actually directly compare the stars between the old label and the new label, because under the old label, the star rating is calculated based on one performance test at maximum capacity. And so it's how well it performs at that test, whereas for the new rating label, there are tests performed at a number of temperature set points as well as a number of capacities. So there'll be like full capacity, half capacity, minimum capacity, and if it's got an overcapacity unit, it can be tested at that as well. So air conditioner sizing. Again, for some people in the room, you will already completely understand this, but just making sure that everyone's on the same page. But firstly, the most important thing for a customer is to get the right size unit for their space. And size, we're talking about the heating and cooling capacity of the unit, not how physically big it is on the wall. If a unit is too small, it's going to be very inefficient. The air conditioner will be running its little heart out, it'll be going as hard as it can. It's going to be running at full power the whole time, and it may not actually heat or cool the room effectively because it's too small for the space. If it's a little too big, that's generally just about right, and the unit will work efficiently. If it's way too big, the unit is more expensive than what the customer needs, and what happens is the unit will just ramp on, it'll hit its set point and ramp down. It'll be ramping on and off all the time. That's really inefficient. It's never running at its sweet spot. So it becomes very inefficient, and it's not what the customer needs. And when you're sizing a unit, again, for installers, I'm sure you know this very well, there's a bunch of factors that you need to look at. So look at the floor space. So for example, we've got a 3-bedroom house on the left here, and the customers are going, oh, I want an air conditioner to do my open plan kitchen diner area, kitchen diner lounge. And so go, oh, I've looked at my floor space, but then you also need to look at what insulation you have, what's your external wall material, how many windows you have, what shading you have, what orientation there are, and a couple of other factors. So all of these things combined will tell you what size unit you need for the space. And the most important thing here is that correct sizing ensures that the customer will remain comfortable and doesn't use more electricity than necessary. And that's really the whole point of the energy rating label for air conditioners like the program. So installation, use a licensed installer. In fact, you have to, it's the law. So retailers should ensure that they advise customers to use a licensed technician to install and service their air conditioner. And installers must hold a refrigerant handling license, which is issued by the Australian Refrigeration Council. There's information about this program on the Look for the Tick website. Note, portable air conditioner units can be installed by customers, but they should be serviced by someone who holds a refrigerant handling license. In the ozone protection and synthetic greenhouse gas program presentation, they'll talk more about licenses and why people need specific things going forward. Portable air conditioners. So from the 1st of April 2020, all new portable air conditioners must be registered and must display a ZIRL prior to being sold. If you've got existing stock in Australia, it can be sold until exhausted without registering or displaying, but there are some conditions on this, and if you're unsure, you can email us at the energyrating@environment.gov.au website, or you can check with your supplier. Note that portable evaporative coolers don't need to be registered. They're not covered under our legislation. One of the important things about portable air conditioners is that the star rating for all single duct portable units is 0 in all zones. And I've got a slide later on which will go into detail about why that is. But the main thing here is that if you are unsure about the registration and labelling requirements of any of the portable air conditioners that you sell, check with your supplier. And again, you can contact us at Energy Rating. So now onto the registration and compliance section. So under the GEMS Act, air conditioners covered by the determination can only be supplied, offered for supply, or used for a commercial purpose if the model's registered under the GEMS Act against the relevant determination. So that process is usually managed by the manufacturer or importer, but not always. So if in doubt, there's a public register available on the energyrating.gov.au website that you can go and check and try to find the model to see if it's registered, or you can again check with your supplier. So products of the model must comply with the requirements of the determination. That means it's got to meet the GEMS level, so that's the MEPS, the minimum energy performance standards. It's got to meet the labelling requirements. That is, for air conditioners, it needs to clearly display an energy rating label or a zoned energy rating label as required, and any other GEMS requirements such as like things about higher efficiencies. So for the purposes that we're talking about today, we're talking about the zoned energy rating label, and it's an offence under the GEMS Act to supply offer or use the unit for commercial purposes if the product does not display an energy rating label when it is meant to. So the GEMS labelling requirements are set out in the relevant legislative instrument called a determination. So the most important point to note is that each unit of a model displayed in the store must have a label, an energy rating label or a ZERL displayed in some form. So having the energy rating label clearly visible enables potential purchasers to consider the energy efficiency of the model and make an informed decision on which air conditioner is best suited for their circumstances. So you'll see down in the bottom right of the slide, there's a little icon, which is a trimmed down version of the ZERL. So this is for use in print or online advertising. You don't have to use this. You also can't use this to advertise on units in store, but if you want to use it for print advertising or online advertising, use this one. So, GEMS labelling requirements. So retailers vary in the way each offer to supply models of air conditioners. However, the basic idea is that each unit that is on display must have an energy rating label. So as an example here on this slide, you'll see a dummy head unit, which is a way that a lot of retailers look to prepare and look to present their stock. And they've put 3 price tags on there. Now those 3 price tags don't all relate to the one model that's being indicated. They're looking at different models of different capacity. So for each of those price tags, you need to have a ZERL or an energy rating label attached. Because without it, the customer doesn't have an idea of what the energy rating and how efficient the unit is and can't compare it against other models. So here's a couple of things not to do. So in the example on the left, you've got a dummy head with 3 labels on it, but there's only one ZERL. So the customer can't tell what the energy rating and the efficiency of either of the units that are referred to by the price tags on the left and right are. And what people like to do, some retailers like to do, is put big sale stickers on their units. That's fine, put sale stickers wherever you want, just not over an energy rating label. Now, supply via installers. So many consumers rely on the installers to select the most appropriate air conditioner for their circumstances. In these situations, the customer might not ever actually see a label, particularly if you're an installer who doesn't have a shop front. So some consumers may jump online, do their own research, and some of them will come away more confused, and they're generally looking to you as installers to provide them the right information about what's right for them. So that's like the right size, maybe comparing between some models and just giving them the right information. So this is where we believe the ZERL will be a great tool to help installers make it easier for the consumer to understand and guide the customers to the most appropriate choice for their circumstances. So the ZERL with its 3 climate zones helps people understand how, for example, the cooling function is more important than the heating function when you're talking about installations in like Darwin or Cairns. Whereas here in Melbourne, you're probably looking at more cooling hours, so more heating hours than you would up north. So, and similarly, the 2-degree heating capacity is more relevant for places like Canberra where it does get really cold. So now into the section on things that you might need to know and some questions that you might get asked by your customers. So how long will there be 2 labels in store? So as I mentioned earlier, suppliers can register products to the old determination and they can do that up until the day before this one comes into force, so up until the 31st March 2020. And registrations of units are valid for 5 years. So if a unit is registered or renewed to the old determination, they can only use the old energy rating label until they upgrade or renew to the new determination. So that means that because the registrations last for 5 years, there's a potential for us to see the old label on units in store until 2025. But we do expect that suppliers will move quickly to the new label. So customers might ask you, well, how do I work out how much this unit's going to cost me to run every year? So one of the good things with the new zone energy rating label is that it provides you an indicative energy consumption. So for each zone, it'll provide a kilowatt hour number for both cooling and heating. You can multiply, or so you can add those two numbers together and then multiply by the electricity tariff. And that'll give you an indicative cost. But a really clear point to make here is that the kilowatt hour numbers that you've got should first really just be used as a comparison figure. Like as an example, if you've got one unit that says it's going to use 1,000 kilowatt hours for cooling in a year and one that says it's going to use 1,200, what that's really telling you is the one with 1,200 is going to use 20% more electricity over the course of a year, no matter how you use it, pretty much. The numbers that are presented in kilowatt hours are really only an indication. They're based on a bunch of factors, which I'll get into on the next slide. So here we've taken the total kilowatt hour number here of 1,026. We've multiplied it by 29 cents per kilowatt hour, which is an average domestic electricity tariff in Australia. And for this unit, it works out to be just under $300 a year that it'll cost a customer to run this unit, in this example, in the hot zone. So in Brisbane or Darwin, for example. So how is that annual electricity consumption figure calculated? The first thing to say is it's actually really complex, but there are three factors that go into it. So the first is the annual temperature profile in each zone. So what this is based on is a typical meteorological year file, which has basically gone, what is the temperature likely to be on average every hour of the day from the 1st of January to the 31st of December. And so that provides a pattern. As an example, we've used 3 reference files to make the ZERL. So the hot zone is based on a reference file for Rockhampton in Queensland. The average zone is based on Richmond, New South Wales, which is just in northwest Sydney. And the cold zone is based on Canberra. So these are indicative. The second point is how people use their air conditioner. So what goes into this is that at certain temperatures, people will use their air conditioners differently, but there's an assumption that, say if it's 21 degrees outside, people might be using their unit for cooling for 10% of the time. If it gets to 35 degrees outside, it's expected that 95% of the time people will be running their air conditioner for cooling. But this will change because people are people and people do things differently. And then the third factor is the electricity use by air conditioners at each temperature. So we figure this out through the registration process, because units are tested at multiple points and multiple capacities to give an understanding of how much energy they're likely to use at each temperature. These 3 factors are pulled together into an algorithm, which ends up giving you an annual electricity consumption in each zone. But again, this number it can only really be used initially as a comparison between units, because how people use their air conditioners is going to change. Some people will go, I'm not turning my air conditioner on until it hits 35 degrees and I'm just gonna swelter, and that's fine. Other people are going, if it gets past 20 degrees, it's on full bore all the time because I don't like it. So depends how people use it. So it's really complex. We can talk more in detail about this in questions if people like. So why are there 2 heating capacities on the zoned energy rating label? So as I mentioned earlier, the performance of some units is impacted by cold conditions. So when it's below 5.5 degrees, you can get frosting, you can get the air conditioner coils will freeze up. So the new determination requires testing at 2 degrees, unlike the old determination where it was optional. So the 2 degree heating capacity is useful for customers in cold climates because it'll tell them if the unit's actually going to perform well at lower temperatures. So some units will have a lower heating capacity at 2 than 7, some it'll be about the same, some will be more. Generally, if you're in a cold climate, look for units that are at least as good, if not better, at 2 degrees than at 7. What this isn't giving you is an indication of how efficient the unit is running at 2 degrees, but it'll tell you how much heating it can provide. So portable air conditioners again. So why do single duct portable units have a 0-star rating? So it's true, single duct portable air conditioners will blow cold air at you if you're in a room. But they have one duct going out the back, which is expelling air, generally at about 50 litres a second. So it's basically dragging air out of the room. That's creating a bit of negative air pressure in the room that you're in. And so air will try to leak in from anywhere that it can. So that could be from open windows or from under doors or for anywhere that it can come in. And generally, if it's really hot outside and you're trying to cool yourself down, the air that's coming in is going to be really hot. So what you're doing is you're taking cooler conditioned air, throwing it outside and bringing in more hot air to replacement. So while you might feel cold sitting in front of the air conditioner, your room is actually heating up. And so the stars on the Zerl are an indication of how well an air conditioner actually cools or heats a room. And because the unit's not actually cooling the room, it can't actually achieve any stars. So the main point to make here really is that often portable air conditioners have been marketed as directly comparable or better than small split system units. What the new determination and the new label, and especially showing 0 stars for portables, really shows is the efficiency difference between portables and a small split system. And this is still understanding that portable units are the only option for people in certain circumstances. So the government isn't regulating them out of existence. They're still a product that people can use. It's just highlighting that there are better choices available when you can make those choices. So what we've developed as part of this program is some communications material to help train your staff and inform your customers. So we've got an information booklet, which you will have picked up on your way in, which gives you, like as a retailer or an installer, quite a lot of information and answers to questions, a lot of the stuff I've covered in this presentation. And we have a fact sheet, which goes into detail about all the different parts of the Zerl. And then on the back, gives a bit of a brief case study from like finding out what size air conditioner you need to what zone am I in, which unit should I choose, one with more stars and less energy consumption, and then working out how much it costs. So this is a tool that you can use to train your staff or inform your clients. And we have more copies available of these. So if you would like more of them, when you get your feedback form, which we'll get to you after morning tea, fill them out and say, I would like more of these, and we'll send them out to you. And if you have any suggestions on anything else that you need or any other ways that we can help you to train your staff about this program or to inform your customers, we're more than happy to hear your suggestions.